Hi, everyone. Welcome to day 16 of NaPoWriMo 2021. You're past the halfway point if you're playing in real time. So, I have something a little different for today. Let's just get into it. I am going to be sharing a poem by the renowned Elizabeth Bishop called The Fish. I caught a tremendous fish and held him beside the boat, half out of water, with my hook fast in a corner of his mouth. He didn't fight. He hadn't fought at all. He hung a grunting weight, battered and venerable and homely. Here and there, his brown skin hung in strips like ancient wallpaper, and its pattern of darker brown was like wallpaper. Shapes like full blown roses, stained and lost through age. He was speckled with barnacles, fine rosettes of lime, and infested with tiny white sea lice. And underneath, 2 or 3 rags of green weed hung down. While his gills were breathing in the terrible oxygen, the frightening gills, fresh and crisp with blood that can cut so badly. I thought of the coarse white flesh packed in like feathers, the big bones and the little bones, the dramatic reds and blacks of his shiny entrails, and the pink swim bladder like a big peony. I looked into his eyes, which were far larger than mine, but shallower and yellowed, the irises backed and packed with tarnished tinfoil seen through the lenses of old scratched isinglass. They shifted a little, but not to return my stare. It was more like the tipping of an object toward the light. I admired his sullen face, the mechanism of his jaw, and then I saw that from his lower lip, if you could call it a lip, grim, wet, and weapon like, hung 5 old pieces of fish line, or 4 and a wire leader with the swivel still attached, with all their 5 big hooks grown firmly in his mouth. A green line frayed at the end where he broke it, 2 heavier lines, and a fine black thread still crimped from the strain and snap when it broke and he got away. Like metals with their ribbons frayed and wavering, a 5-haired beard of wisdom trailing from his aching jaw. I stared and stared, and victory filled up the little rented boat from the pool of bilge where oil had spread a rainbow around the rusted engine to the bailer rusted orange, the sun-cracked thwarts, the oarlocks on their strings, the gunnels, until everything was rainbow, rainbow, rainbow. And I let the fish go. Mm, mm. Okay. So many things we could say about Elizabeth Bishop, which I will share at the end. But first, let's get into the prompt. And before I lead you through this one, our mantra, like every day you show up, every day is different. I'd like to invite you to just listen and feel these words in your mind. I am here and present with my experiences. I am grounded and open. I have unlimited access to the infinite flow of creativity always around me. Whatever happens on these pages today is what's meant to happen. I'm not judging myself or my writing. I'm just writing. I have everything I need to begin already inside of me. I'm settling in and I'm ready to write. Okay, so thinking especially about your mind today and how it interacts with things in your world on day 16, looking at The Fish by Elizabeth Bishop. So, first today, I'd like to invite you to do something a little different than normal. And this is simply to observe without writing anything at all yet. I'm putting 3 minutes on the clock. You can do however long you like. And I'm going to give you two options. So, thinking about how our mind observes things in our physical world or in our mental world, if you have the option, this is actually option two, I'm going to start with this one, but if you have the option to spend a few minutes pausing after I finish telling you to pause this video and then go either outside or somewhere in your dwelling if you have any other living creatures in your dwelling. But go somewhere where you can observe a living creature right now in your immediate environment. And I want you to spend 3 minutes just observing them with your mind. Don't write anything down, don't take notes. Just allow your observation and your perception to consciously and intentionally enter your awareness. If you cannot or do not want to physically observe another living creature right now, and that can be an animal or an insect or a human, so living creature. But if you can't do that right now, just sit here for 3 minutes and close your eyes and breathe into your sense of presence right now. And then ask your mind to send you an image of a time when you were struck by awe at another living creature. So, again, animal, plant, insect, human. Recall this moment once you have like one moment in mind. Recall this moment in as much vivid detail as you can and allow your mind to simply send you images or sensations of that moment, observing another living creature with your eyes closed, not looking at your page, simply observing your mind, observing another creature. Okay, so please do that if you want, and then come back. Okay, now that you have had a moment to observe without writing, now let's get into a free write. And with your pen and paper or laptop in front of you, holding that encounter with that creature in your mind, write down as much detail, as vivid as you can, as much as you remember onto your page. Okay, so just try and translate it, what you just experienced. Also, as you're doing this, free write into your own mind, observing this creature. What is your mind doing? What is your consciousness doing as you observe another living creature? How does your mind process your relationship to another living being outside of yourself? So take note of whatever comes to mind, questions, revelations, observing your own consciousness, observing the consciousness of another. Okay, and then come back for the final step. All right, putting it all together and remembering this poem. And if you'd like to refer back to it in the link, feel free. I want to invite you to focus today's poem on this one encounter with another living creature and bring into your poem as much detailed observation as you can possibly remember observing. So, this is a prompt really about actually focusing on something outside of yourself and allowing your mind to translate any details that you notice. So, this is really very different from some of the ways I have been giving prompts previously. It's more about slowing down, noticing your mind, and allow in your poem as you write, allow yourself, allow your mind to interrupt your details with your own mind's observations. So, for example, you can use and input lines like I think or I wonder. As we saw Elizabeth Bishop encountering this creature of the fish, her own mind was writing lines that was her consciousness observing this creature. So it's a little bit meta. We're slowing down. Um, so you can consider this an exercise in exploring your own consciousness, observing another consciousness. So feel free to like breathe and be present with your experience of your own mind and see what comes out. Again, this is more of a slow down. Maybe you want to take each moment and each word rather than rapid fire, which I'll admit is how I usually write. Maybe you want to practice slowing down and thinking about each word as it erupts from your mind onto the page. Some of you might already have this as a natural way of writing, but either way, see if you want to practice this slow down of consciousness, focus on one encounter with another creature, write as many details from your observation as you can, and just see what happens. Okay, so have fun, and I'll meet you back here for a tidbit with Elizabeth Bishop. All right. Well, if you are returning, I have so much to say about Elizabeth Bishop, though not as much as there could be said. There's always more to say, but I am sure that many of you watching this video are already familiar with Elizabeth Bishop. She was a she has become a very famous poet in American literature. However, interestingly, that was not always the case. And I learned that, since she died in 1979, so she lived from 1911 to 1979. After she died, her reputation actually grew, her critical reputation. And since her death, posthumously, she has come to be known as one of the most important American poets of the 20th century. And interestingly, unlike some of the other previous poets I have mentioned who have written like dozens of books, and hundreds or thousands of poems, Bishop actually was not very prolific. So thinking about the prompt we just did, the slowing down, the precision, this was a characteristic of Bishop's writing. She only published 101 poems during her lifetime. And so she published sparingly. However, the poems she did publish, she worked on, really spent a lot of time polishing each poem. And we can see that in her work, which is often praised for its technical brilliance and formal variety. So she's a very respected yet somewhat obscure figure in the world of American literature. What I can tell you that I have learned from her early life is that, her father died when she was a baby, and then her mother was institutionalized for mental illness when Bishop was 5. So I just think about how our early lives and our environments really shape who we become as writers. And interestingly, I don't know the details, but Bishop was independently wealthy. So she actually was writing in a place of privilege where she was able to travel the world and observe a lot of different environments and experiences, which is another, again, characteristic of her work. Her work tends to be outward focused and observational to the world around her, very precise observations, which is really kind of what we were trying to do in this prompt. Um, so she was also a painter, which I find also interesting. Again, thinking about the other lives that poets lead. Poets are visual creatures as well as auditory, because a poem includes both images on the page as well as sound through its vocalization. But I find it interesting that Bishop was a painter because it shows to me a natural tendency in her to be focused on the scenes around her and her environment around her, visually observing and sensory observation of her physical world around her. Um, so that to me is a very different style of writing than I naturally practice on. Like, if I were to be given no instruction, and even this is how I started writing, was more free writing, just first thought, best thought, stream of consciousness, what comes through. The subconscious is processing so many images all the time. I'm a very fast writer. If you might have heard, two categories of writers, fast writers and slow writers. I'd say Bishop is a slow writer, and there's no judgment upon either of these. In fact, they're both just two different ways of approaching writing, but definitely one person can practice both of them. And the more that I practice slow writing, the more I learn about my own process. So I often think it's really great to push against your natural tendency. So if you are a fast writer, slowing down might reveal some things to you. I'm interested what this prompt might have revealed to your poetic mind. And if you're a slow writer and you are more of a perfectionist when it comes to the first mark on the page, and I know some of you are, um, for you, your pushback against your own tendency might be to try and open up the valve of free writing and rapid writing more intentionally. So, being a writer, a lot of it is about knowing our own tendencies and trying new things, pushing against our own tendencies, not like resistance, but like just opening up new avenues of exploration, right? And so Bishop was very much an observational poet, a land, and in my mind, like to me, what comes to mind is like a landscape poet. She's writing about the landscapes around her as well as inside of her, because like this prompt shows and the poem that we read shows, there can be a precise observational quality to a poem upon the physical world, as well as a precise observational quality upon the internal world and how the mind is processing the physical world around you. An interaction of consciousness is how I really like to think about it. And consciousness, I think, is something we could talk about until the end of time. But I was recently in a poetry therapy conference, National Association for Poetry Therapy, that had a great workshop. I'm forgetting the name right now, but I learned about Buddhist practices of slowing down to encounter your own consciousness. And that's sort of where I'm bringing that into this prompt, to slow down and observe our mind operating even on a daily basis. For those of us who might have like an overactive imagination or anxiety or high sensory stimulation in our physical bodies, as a life practice as well as a writing practice, this breathing deeply, this slowing down, this integrating your physical world with your internal world can actually, in my opinion, be highly beneficial, not only to your writing, but to your state of well being within yourself. If you are like me, it's something that is non negotiable. I need to meditate every day. And, there's that saying that if you don't have time to meditate for 20 minutes every day, well, then you need to meditate for an hour. Take it or leave it. Everyone has different bodies and experiences, but speaking for myself, it's important. And let me close with a quote on Elizabeth Bishop from the sources below. Bishop's poetics is one distinguished by tranquil observation, craft-like accuracy, care for the small things of the world, a miniaturist's discretion and attention, So, one of the things I can learn from Bishop is how to slow down and observe the landscape of your world and your mind in your poetic practice. So, I mean, I have a whole I have Bishop's complete works on my shelf that I have read about half of. Maybe someday I'll finish it, but if you are interested in this style of poetry, I highly recommend checking out more of Bishop's work. And I'll just close it there for today. Thanks for joining me and have a great rest of your day.